Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Off the Cushion podcast. I'm Sam Porverzana, and I'm joined by Dwayne Rester. How's it going, Dwayne?
It's going really well, Sam. Good to see you again.
Good, great to see you, and great to have everyone here listening. Dwayne, today we're going to discuss the Chan or Zen view of the nature of mind. I'm just going to read a brief passage from the platform scripture of the sixth ancestral teacher, Huineng. And this has been translated by Guogu in his book Silent Illumination. A Chan Buddhist Path to Natural Awakening is the name of the book. So Huineng says, good friends, since the past, this teaching of ours has first taken no thought as its principle, no form as its essence, and non-abiding as its foundation. No thought means to be without thought in the midst of thinking. No form is to transcend form within the context of forms and appearances. Non-abiding is your fundamental nature. All worldly things are empty. Just going to read it again.
Yeah.
Good friends, since the past, this teaching of ours has first taken no thought as its principle, no form as its essence, and non-abiding as its foundation. No thought means to be without thought in the midst of thinking. No form is to transcend form within the context of forms and appearances. Non-abiding is your fundamental nature. All worldly things are empty. We have these three principles: no thought, no form, and non-abiding in Chan. And Dwayne, you have a really great way of um, not only explaining these concepts, but bringing them down from the clouds and making them accessible to newcomers in a context that we can understand either as Buddhist practitioners or people who don't have any experience with Buddhism. Do you want to kick us off and uh, let us know some ways that we can think about these?
Okay. Um, a good way to talk about this very important sutra um, by within the Chan or Zen world is from the sixth patriarch Huineng. Um, our teacher has said that if you don't understand or have some appreciation of the platform sutra, that you really don't understand Chan or Zen. Um, in the Buddhist world, a sutra was something generally written by the Buddha. The only non the only sutra that was written by someone who was not the Buddha was the sixth patriarch, Huineng, as accepted by all the lineages that followed him afterwards. But some of this terminology, like sutras and no thought, no form, non-abiding, what is that really kind of about? And it can be in two levels. One is, enlightenment or awakening. But as Sam said, I like to approach whatever we do here from how does this matter to me in my daily life? I still have a job, I've got kids, I've got bills. I don't know what tomorrow brings in this crazy economy. So another way to look at this is by how can we be content? How can we, through contentment, I mean to be okay with the way things are, um, but without getting pulled down into the the sewer that life can be, to rise above the waves in a way, to be content, to ride along, still do what you need to do, but without all the heavy stress and burden of life.
Right.
So a practice of contentment. Now, when we look at these three principles of no thought, no form, non-abiding, this can kind of lead us into a way of reframing our state of mind, reframing not only the way that we internalize information via our own thoughts and knowledge, but also with the way that we perceive the world. And that being said, then how do we approach the world with a more open and receptive mind, kind of a non-resistant mind? So these principles, no thought, no form, non-abiding. Now, when you hear something like no thought, what this means is that we are still thinking, we still have to, do the complicated things that we do in life, driving a car, doing chemistry, baking a cake. You still have to follow recipes. You still have to follow, but what doesn't happen, doesn't help with that endeavor, those endeavors, is when we add in a lot of other internalizations of emotions and of thoughts and perceptions. So what are we talking about when we say, what are those? What's the thought category? Not intellectual thinking, but what is a thought category? An added thought, we'll call it. An added thought,
Like a narrative overlay.
yeah, like a narrative overlay. Our stories and opinions, our experiences. Um, um, I guess I'll give a quick example of something I gave, I think just yesterday at a meditation group, and it just came to mind, and it just came to mind now, is I was a jury foreman recently on a trial, and there was some particular handling of evidence that I thought could have been better. And but based on the rules of evidence and whatnot, I realized that my preconceived notion on the chain of custody of evidence should be a particular way. And I didn't actually see it that way. I thought there was a problem. And so we talked about it, and there was only 6 of us total. After starting with 35, by the way. Then 21 were selected. I'm just backing up a little bit just to kind of show also this idea of no thought. That they put 35 people in the courthouse. What would that have been? 14? Yeah, 14 were immediately dismissed just upon observation.
Okay.
And then we had 21 that were in a group. And out of that 21, they started giving little details of the upcoming trial. And based on people's preconceived notion, yeah, I know that guy, or well, that cop over there sucks, or no, I know that guy, automatically eliminated. Another
Right. Okay.
14. Because why? They already had preconceived notions. They already had narratives. They had stories. They were embedded already because it's a small community. So they were already embedded. So they were looking for people without an agenda,
Sure.
unbiased. So another thought of a way of saying unbiased. But anyway, even with all that, still we had reservations. So we would meet in the jury room and we'd talk about rules of evidence or whatever it happened to be. And had I just hammered my one idea that might have been a problem with the chain of custody and not listened to anyone, and I was a jury foreman, that whole the result could have been vastly different,
Mm,
and very possibly leading someone who was dangerous back on the street.
okay.
Uh, but I listened to the evidence that they had, the other jurors, and it was like, oh yeah, okay, now I see your point of view.
Mm,
Now later we're going to talk about non-abiding, meaning being open and receptive. But what was giving me some trouble was my military experience with chain of custody of evidence, and probably any other thought that might have been attached to that. So, but remembering that I'm filtering through my own extrapolated knowledge based on this trial. So I was layering something and putting something there that that really wasn't real, because as soon as I brought it up, one or two people ask a question. Well, do you remember he said this or that? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. And that completely eliminated my preconceived notion,
hmm.
my hard view, because I was
Totally.
open.
Yep.
Um, and so if you look at it from that and begin to dissect any when you have an interaction in your own head, more information is coming in, and you say, huh. Because what happens if we don't kind of pause at least to inquire, is what in my head correct? Um, if we continue on that, we miss opportunities. We miss uh, other things that, as we begin to talk about no form, we lose a level of creativity. We lose a level of uh, intellectual inquiry. If we already have convinced ourselves that we know what we're talking about, automatically, as far as learning things, we're already dead in our mind. We're already dead. We've sealed that coffin. I know this. How could you possibly learn anything? So
Mm.
we cut off learning, we cut off creativity. So that's kind of a base of no thought. Um, what is no form? Uh, no form is looking at how we relate to the world, the external world. Let's say things out there. Like in my background, this is a creek in Vermont with nice stone and stuff like that.
It's beautiful.
Yes, it is beautiful. And um, if I limit my opinions of a landscape to a preference of what I would prefer in a landscape and not see um, what the beauty could be there. And for instance, in Sam's background, I think I may have given this example before, but there's a beach, but this could be a beach anywhere. And oftentimes people may go to a place and say, well, why would I go back there? I've been there. You know, I've got that t-shirt. Well, it's never ever the same. In the previous talk, we talked about impermanence and the way things are always changing. The skies are never the same using Sam's background. The waves are never the same. The the artistry of the waves on the sand is never the same. The little creatures that are there. We live, that particular beach is a bit rural. You notice no hotels or anything like that. There we have encountered bear there. We've encountered alligators, believe it or not, even though it's
Oh my
salt
God.
water. There's a river nearby.
Wow. Okay.
We've encountered eagles. We've encountered all manner of creature there. And so it's quite stunning. And yet, I'm sure there's people that live in this small community. They're like, no, I haven't been to the beach in years.
Hmm.
I've been there. I know what that looks like. Do we catch ourselves saying that same kind of thing?
Totally. All the time, I'm sure.
And then we do it with people. Oh, there's that guy again. Oh my goodness. You know, and oh yeah, that if we throw an expectation on a person, on a place, and then we look for that expectation to happen, we're going to find it. We're going to find some peace and then further solidify our conceptualization of that place, that thing, or that person. And we miss everything that might be new and unique because things are always changing. If we look at all form, what is called form, which is external, our way of objectifying anything outside. All things are products of causes and conditions, which is another term you'll often hear in Buddhism. Um, that certain causes create certain conditions.
Right.
You know, like I gave the example of seeing an alligator on otherwise waters from the Gulf of Mexico.
Hmm.
Well, if we were 10 more miles down the beach, you would not see an alligator there except the body to wash up on the shore because it doesn't have the kind of, they can't survive in that kind of water. It's too
Sure.
salt.
Sure.
But On the Psalm's right side of that photograph is a river that comes in, Carabel
Mm.
River, and a huge swampland. And so there's lots of dangerous critters that live there.
Oh, interesting.
The alligator was there not out of chance. The alligator was there because of conditions. Uh, the cause of the alligator being there was the conditions of a river close by. So, simple example of causes and conditions. When we look at people, and sometimes people behave quite badly in the world. And if we try to take a more open perspective of why they may behave that way, it might be because of their background, how they were raised. I don't want to get into politics too much, but we could think of examples of people who behave badly, and of course that's subjective. But if we look at a more global opinion, it's like this isn't a good thing to do. Um, take a massive genocide that might be happening here or there. There are conditions that led up to that.
Hmm. Doesn't exist in a vacuum.
It doesn't exist in a vacuum. And
Hmm.
so one thing begets another thing, begets another thing, begets another thing. And suddenly we have genocide. Or maybe we have a Supreme Court justice that drives a $400,000 RV that he didn't purchase.
Hmm.
There's conditions, there's causes, or I'm sorry, there's conditions that formed into that.
Hmm.
So if we're able to kind of dissect that and be a little bit more open and receptive, which is what we're going to talk about next, which is non-abiding, we, and in both these cases, with no thought and no form, the more we become open to how we internalize these pieces of information, we broaden our scope. We become a little bit more nuanced or
Hmm.
creative in our ideas, and not
Right,
so
right.
fixed, not so fixed. And in that, and in within that also, let's say that within no form, and within causes and conditions that perhaps things aren't going really good right now. But do we need to we can get buried like, oh my God, things aren't good right now. Things are terrible. Say you have a problem with rent going up, but you don't have enough money. Now you could completely freak out about that um, cause or that outcome. But within looking at the way conditions can change based on other causes. Okay, so perhaps, all right, is it impossible for me to come up with more money? Perhaps, maybe there's other things, maybe reduce expenses, maybe get a different job, maybe move to another place, but not get so stagnant in our heart that we're at a level that we can no longer move.
Hmm.
So things come about for various reasons. And if we're able to just kind of be open to that, maybe we can again find more creative ways of dealing with things as opposed to just getting cemented in fear or terror or anger or whatever, because life is complicated. And often it doesn't turn out the way that we want to do. And even when it does turn out the way that we want it to, that had its own levels of causes and conditions.
Hmm.
So let's talk about non-abiding. Um, when in that quote that you had read, and again, this is where sometimes Buddhist lingo gets kind of mixed up, or kind of odd. Non-abiding is our fundamental nature. What do we mean by what is meant by fundamental nature?
Absolutely.
And in Chan or Zen lingo, they may call it um, awakening. They may call it true nature. both of these terms have their own constraints to them.
Pretty
Words,
loaded in
language
general.
get so, yeah, words and language get so confusing. So, what is our fundamental? What is our true nature? Um, kind of a simple way to talk about it is when we go from one set of thinking to another set of thinking based on inputs from things that we hear, things that we see, there's a space in between thoughts. Um, we're not we're not brain dead. There's still mental activity. Um, that space in between constructed thoughts from when I maybe like say when I describe my background or Sam's background, when we left from one place to the other place, the mind was hopefully not recording and repeating anything that's been said or any thought, but just this just gentle movement from one background. Look, my background. Look at the rocks and the river and stuff like that. Now look at the other background. There was an instant in there that there was no formation, no thought, and no formation of thought, and no fixed opinion. It's that tiny little place there. That is our true nature. That is that empty space between mental constructs.
Mhm.
Okay, that's still a hard one to grasp, but it's another. Let's see, another example. Um, well, I'll go back to the example I gave where I had this idea of control of evidence. Someone asked a question, and in that dissecting or letting go of my opinion and opening to that other person's opinion, there was a break in cognition. Doesn't mean I was brain dead, doesn't mean I wasn't intellectual. It means I let go of this thought and considered this one. So in between those places, that's our non-abiding. That's well, not, abiding is when I was attached to a thought. Abiding was when this guy had his actual thought. The non-abiding was a place in between where
Mm.
things changed. It's hard to kind of conceptualize that, but let's take that one apart a little bit. The way we fundamentally deal with the world is through what in Buddhism is called the three poisons: greed, hatred, and ignorance. Greed could also be looked at of wanting more of something. Hatred is that's a hard word, but it's purposely put there to say I want less of this, or I don't want this. I want this, greed. I don't want that, aversion. Um, Greed, hatred, and ignorance. Ignorance is not realizing that it is because of grasping, because of rejecting, we, ignorance, attach to one of those modes, either grasping or we attach to rejecting,
Mhm.
and we create our own suffering. A big term in Buddhism, on the previous talk, we talked about suffering, impermanence, and not self. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, except to say that when we want the world to be different than it is, we create resistance.
That's right.
When we want more of something, we create a greed that may not ever come into fruition. But if we look at two other factors that we had previously talked about with suffering, which we talked about what that was is wanting more of something, not wanting that, and not being satisfied with the discontinuity between those things. But a way to begin to disassemble these desires or aversions is to look at it from a point of impermanence, which is ever changing, or emptiness.
Yes.
Um, emptiness is kind of, in a Chan perspective, all of this can be boiled down to the word of the idea of emptiness, that everything ever is never stagnant. Like I'd given the description of the beach, it's always changing. But also what is considered the beach, like in the Psalms background. Where is the beach? Is it that mat that's on the ground? Is it the sand? Is it the grass? Is it the waves? Is it the wet sand or the dry sand? Is it the little crustaceans that are on the beach? Is it the dolphins that are probably there in the background? We have a lot of dolphins. Is it the alligator? It's all of these things. And that is what when Buddhists talk about emptiness, it's empty of a stagnant, unchanging, permanent, solid thing.
Exactly.
And some people can say, well, that sounds terrible. No, it's actually where our freedom lies, our true nature lies is by if we can kind of in our minds deconstruct these fixed notions that we have, and see even from one we kind of break this down into body and mind. Right now, I'm talking about mind. Mind meaning the way we form our thoughts, form our interactions, the way we deal with the world. If we can deconstruct these things through, oh, that's right, that's just my thought, that's just my opinion, my view. Of course, there's a time and place for those things, but they don't have to go into everything we do. When we look at it from this idea of, I've given this form, I know that person, I know this job, I know that, and we don't look at it from a form of, well, that really came about, that my conceptualization of this situation or this object, it came into being because of all sorts of causes and conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we want to, within causes and conditions, there are things that we can do something about, and there are things that we can't do anything
Mm-hmm.
about.
Mm-hmm.
But the things that we can do about, maybe there's a time for it to be done. Is it now? No, not really, but it'll be in a month. Okay. Well, then we go at it about in a month when we can. So by kind of looking into these things from this aspect, our contentment, the way things are, if we can begin to realize, oh, well, yeah, that's just my idea. And what I thought about that guy or that building or that place was also just my conceptualization. I missed some things. What kind of comes out of that naturally is our contentment.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're no longer forcing ourselves in a place of suffering because we're not satisfied with the way things are
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
not happy with the things we are. We can at least be content. And then when we're able, if this is something that's within our realm of control or locus control, well, then we do something about it. But let's say it's something that we can't really do anything about, or we want to be clear of mind when we do engage. In our lineage, we talk a lot about the body. Um, Body meaning all the, when we have thoughts, when we have interactions, these thoughts and these interactions with the world often show up in places in our body, primarily in our forehead, in our shoulders, and in our stomach. To simplify it, when we're really concerned, really going over some stuff, really just buried in thoughts, buried and worried, this shows up often in our forehead.
Mm-hmm.
By being in tune with this tension and relaxing this area, some of this emotional loop that ties in with tension in our limbic system, by simply bringing awareness to these areas in our body, we can kind of break that high anxiety or highly emotional mind, to kind of set that aside for now, and let's look at this logically, which we were all this other stuff we were pretty much previously talking about
That's
this
right.
deconstructing of ideas. We cannot get there at will if we're tense in our body. This is very true. You'll notice this in your life. So by going to the body and say, okay, I need to take a breather. I need to go for a walk in the woods. I need to step outside. What are we doing when we do those things? We're actually coming to our body. We're coming to senses outside of our cognitive sense. We're bringing in stuff. If you want to really multiply that effect by being aware of sensations in the body, tensions in the body, we actually do kind of re-engage with a more open and receptive mind. And the key, one of the keys is all this other philosophy, mental philosophy is good. Um, but if we can also address it through our body, we don't have that heavy burden on our shoulders. We all know we've heard this. Well, we actually feel this. We can actually come in tune with this. Damn, why was I so tied up? Well, you were in your fight. You were in your shoulders. But previously we might have been just all in our head and got
Totally.
all this tension in our head. And then our fear response is in our abdomen. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I can't think about what to do. And then maybe we do um, something that we don't even realize that we did by taking a breather, getting something to drink, walking outside,
Break the
um,
cycle.
break the cycle. Even oh my God, this sounds so simple, but even something like I need to eat something because actually what's underlying the underlying tone of this emotion could be hunger. It could be that you actually need to use a bathroom. It could be that you're sleepy. All of these are sensations in the
Mhm.
body
Mhm.
that drive um, mental filtration. Our mind is trying to filter through all these angst in the body, or even previous trauma that could be trapped in the shoulders, the head, the abdomen, but also just day to day something. You're tired, you need to eat, you need to go to the bathroom, and yet you're trying to think of something immensely complex, and you're wondering why you can't get there. It's the
It's
body saying, "Hello, take a break."
fascinating. It's so fascinating.
And so this non-abiding is this practice of bringing this mentality of no thought, no form, also within the body. And of course, we have these overlays of understanding causes and conditions, understanding suffering, impermanence, emptiness. Those I don't want to just classify those as mental philosophies. But in a lot of senses they are. But to have that kind of background, kind of have that understanding, being in tune with what's going on in our body, then what's in tune with going in our mind, then we can kind of reassess the world, and we're no longer actually in this sense of stress. Contentment naturally manifests on its own.
Beautiful.
And of course, this is when we talk about the practice of meditation and watching our thoughts and coming back to the method, watching our thoughts, coming back to the method. All of this, that background, that training gives us the ability to relax our body and be aware of the thoughts going through our mind. Um, but it's necessary to kind of build a platform, i.e., Platform Sutra,
Mhm.
um, as opposed to giving us why this makes sense, why this works, why something that was written in the 12th century is still relevant 1,000 years later. It's like, okay. So that's a kind of a short spiel on a way to bring something that seems almost poetic, although Huining was never really poetic. He was a creature of the language of his time, but he was also, a very, very basic a dude, but yet profoundly changed the world through his teachings. And if you were to not get overly analytical and just kind of hear the message behind the words and then practice these on your own, Even the teachings from the Buddha written, 2,500 years ago. And he also pulled from teachings that were 3 to 4 to 5,000 years old. Um, we are all still born with the same kind of mental continuum and the
Hmm.
same kind of body. So don't ignore it. Don't look for, I mean, you can look for new stuff, but the new stuff is oftentimes just repetition of old stuff.
Right.
Uh, so there's beauty in these words, but sometimes it's really cool to hear it again from somebody else, which don't even take my words, practice on your own on these things and, look at how we construct the world, our view, and look how that impacts us. So there we go.
That's amazing. I really appreciate how you make it accessible with these examples, Dwayne, and your life perspective, having experienced these things for yourself. I think one of the ways that might be helpful to think of these three principles, or really the nature of the way the mind works, is by considering the inverse of them, because that's how we
Yeah,
operate all the time, right? We think of things in terms of being static, or Guogu uses this term that I really like, reified,
yeah,
or being fixed. We think we know a person, our sibling, our partner, uh, a friend, and a person that we think of as an enemy. We have put them in a box, just as we have the pictures that you've been mentioning on the screen. I have a background of a beach scene, and you have a background of a stream scene with rocks, and we think, okay, that's what the beach is, or that's what the stream is. You and I both know, and anyone who's watching the video, not listening, not just listening, would know that a picture is not a real thing. Like it captured a very specific moment in time where things were arrayed as such. A moment later, the waves changed in my scene, the ripples in the water changed in your scene, the crustacean moved across the beach, and things have already changed. You can't, what is the saying? You can't step in the same river twice. Um,
exactly.
Now, if we think of the way that we ordinarily go about things, we get stuck in a specific thought process, whether it's shame or anger, jealousy, greed, other emotions, or even just ruminating about the same thing over and over again. And that is the opposite of no thought. No thought is actually just allowing things to be as they are in terms of our thought process, not getting so swept up by any of the, if we think of our minds as like a, I don't know, like a sky, as an open sky, not getting caught up in any one of the clouds that passes along the sky. The clouds exist on their own, and it really has no bearing on our emotional state or our contentment. Similarly, when we go to no form, when we're talking about the beach, I love this example that you gave, saying, well, where is the beach? Is it the sand underneath my toes? Is it the water that's lapping at my ankles? Is it the reeds? Is it the alligator? Is it the combination of everything? Well, sure, but if we look at any one of those elements, we see beach in there, but we don't see the whole of the beach. And when we look at the whole of the beach, we see all of these different components, but we can't point our finger to exactly where the beach is. It's made up of all of these things. Our minds are the same, and human beings are the same, animals are the same, all beings are the same in this respect, in that everything is relational, everything is based on its relationship with other things. And addressing this, putting all of this together, these two things, no thought and no form, the way that things function in the world is simply a different way of describing it, is non-abiding. Same as the example that you gave in terms of jury duty, same as the moment in between one thought and the other. One example that I'd love to offer is to think about a time when had a really strong emotion, really angry, really jealous, really just burning with shame. How come we don't feel like that right now?
Exactly.
Where did that thought go, right? Where does that feeling, what happened to it? Where did it come from? Why I'm not experiencing it right now? It came from one place. It existed in my sort of mental continuum, my thought process, and then it left. I didn't have to do anything about it. I didn't sit in like 10 hours of meditation to get rid of this jealousy. It's just I'm not thinking about it anymore. I'm thinking about what's for lunch. So that actually is the way the nature of our minds is this non-abiding, meaning it doesn't get stuck, it doesn't get fixed in this rigid state,
Right.
uh, which we talked about the three Dharma seals last week in a previous episode, and I think I don't want to make this too complex, but these three principles of Chan also map very neatly onto those as well. We think about no thought and impermanence. We naturally see that actually we are ascribing permanence to our mental states, to our thoughts. We're saying like I'm a jealous person or I'm an angry person, but that's definitely not true. I'm not angry 24 hours of the day. And if I am, perhaps I need to go to anger management or whatever. But these thoughts come and go. And similarly with no form, we're thinking about emptiness, that no nothing that we experience has a fixed, objective, reified, inherent existence on its own. Everything exists in relation to everything else. It's a very difficult concept to understand. The first one being temporal with impermanence, and the second one being spatial with emptiness.
Yes.
And we talked about last week the three Dharma seals being impermanence, emptiness, and suffering characterizing existence. Well, actually, the inverse of suffering is liberation, is freedom. We're free from this thought that everything is just has this perfect, permanent, fixed entity. We're free from thinking that I'm the center of the universe and everything revolves around me. And I get angry when people don't do as I say that they should do. Uh, and the this concept of non-abiding is literal freedom. It's just that from moment to moment, there's nothing that binds me. I don't have to be an angry person. I don't have to be a jealous person. I don't have to be a greedy person. Actually, these thoughts, these emotions, these feelings, these perceptions of the world and for of other people are ephemeral. They change moment to moment. And and that's what non-abiding is. I've written about this in Tricycle. I'll link the article in the
Oh,
description for
excellent.
this video for more context. But I just wanted to hone in on one point related to something that you said, is that these philosophies are really wonderful and they provide a platform. I like the way you use that platform for our practice, but you really need a working end so that you can put this into practice. And the key component of that is non-abiding. That the methodologies in Chan, the methods in Chan, like silent illumination, Watto practice, they're predicated upon putting us in a state of intentional non-abiding so that we can experience this for ourselves. Yeah, even something as simple as meditating on the breath, that itself is non-abiding because each breath is new, each inhalation, each exhalation is a new cycle for us to experience rather than getting muddled into ruminating on what do I got to do for work? What am I going to make for dinner? What am I going to say to that person that pissed me off? Now I have a really good retort for them. Now when I see them again, not thinking about any of these things. We're just bringing the mind back to the breath. Or with silent illumination, we're just bringing the mind back to the body, to the experience of the body in the present moment. Or with Huato, we haven't really talked about Huato or Kongan practice, but bringing the mind back to this in unsolvable riddle or paradox.
Right.
Uh, the non-abiding, I think, is it's not the most important thing because they're all interrelated and they're all kind of um, uh, describing the same experience of the mind of being fresh and new and um, not stagnant. But that's the place where we really can see the rubber meeting the road and not only practice it in our meditation practice, not getting stuck in any one place, just continuing bringing the mind back to the breath and experiencing the breath in the present moment, but also in our daily lives when we encounter getting stuck, when we feel our shoulders, rising up to our ears, when we feel our chest constricting because our breath's getting tight because we feel upset about something. And that's the moment where we notice, like you said, I think in a previous episode, did the mind move? Did I get stuck in this emotion? And can I invert that or can I break the cycle by instead relaxing my shoulders, focusing on my body, bringing in a deep breath, and not forcing myself to like uh, put on airs and like try to be non-abiding or something, but really just allowing my mind to do its natural function, which is to not get stuck in anything and just be free.
There's a good point you made there about pretending to be non-abiding and being non-abiding. And if you take on that almost stoic approach, there's nothing wrong with stoicism. I've studied that philosophy, but it's a lot of times it's background philosophy placed on a current moment in a forceful way. I'm not gonna react to that. I'm just gonna sit here. Oh. And meanwhile, you're just you are reacting to it.
That's right.
Uh, to truly be non-reactive is to be non-abiding, and having this continuous knowledge of or continuous felt experience of in the body and also being in our own mind, watching for the mind to move. When a mind moves, which is a beautiful statement, did the mind move? Wow. Meaning, did we attach to it via our own views? And did those own attachment through views come from just a constructed preconceived notions, or did it come from reactions to stresses and troubles in the body? Probably it came from both, because these things almost never act in a vacuum in and of themselves. They're usually tied together. And this is what is so critical about the practice of non-abiding, particularly if you're going to go into a situation, you automatically just kind of relax. And again, we'll teach all the time about this. Follow our guided meditation sessions, bringing that into daily life. Then walking into an environment that might not be the best environment in the world. As I previously stated, I was in construction. It's just a chaotic world to be in. But I would always check in with my body to make sure, I wasn't bringing my 15 years of martial arts experience or 10 years in active duty experience into a situation, because at the end of the day, you can't kill everybody and force them to do what you want them to do.
I was gonna
That's
say
not
that could have gone the other way.
that doesn't work too. A war begets war. And so I speak to that from some experience. So but if we can settle our mind, learn to find contentment even in the most stressful situations. And again, this contentment is to ultimately get to this non-abiding, our true nature, our fundamental nature of mind, to not to be carried away by our filtered interpretation of inputs from things that we see or hear or feel, or bring back memory. You had mentioned that, why is it that I'm not angry all the time? Well, let me think about that. And people will sit there and they'll ruminate and they'll bring up memory, and then they can actually get angry again. And guess why? Because that memory has power. Because of a lot of connectedness and attachments to our thoughts and our beliefs, but it's also tied into the body. And so then the brain has this level of cognitive memory, but it also has felt pain in the body that is, kind of stored in the body. And so, yeah, you can actually reinvent that anger or that jealousy. But it is a memory and it is a stored sensation in the body. It is not reality. That time has passed. That is another way of looking at deconstructing thoughts, deconstructing causes and conditions. Because what is real is this moment, and then this moment, and then this moment. That's non-abiding. That's our true nature. If we could just learn how to observe it from a felt and real sense, moment to moment to moment, that's non-abiding.
Can you give us putting on the spot for the third episode in a row? Can you give us a can you give us a practice to see this in our daily lives while we're going about our day, not just on the meditation cushion? Like, how would we practice non-abiding in real life
Okay.
or in daily life, I should say?
All right. So again, given this kind of the philosophical realization of how we can kind of create our own lack of contentment. You kind of have to understand that philosophically, at least. And then let's say you're going to go out to dinner with some friends and some family members, and sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're not.
Hmm.
Um, but to deconstruct that in your mind, go ahead and deconstruct that and say, okay, I'm just going to go and see what happens. I'm just going to, kind of flow with changes because I know that when I do that, oftentimes things um, do turn out different than I had expected.
Of course.
So let's dampen our expectations of something, kind of bring in a level of curiosity. I wonder what's going to happen, as
Hmm.
opposed to I know what's going to
Oh, I
happen. So
love
you
that. I
like
love that.
things. So no expectation, curiosity. Um, and then you go into it with a chilled body, so to speak. You're just relaxed. You're okay. And then just let it flow. Let the magic happen. Even if it's shit, it's still magic, you know? I mean, you can say, well, okay, this went that direction, but all right. That's the practice of contentment, and from that sense that
It is.
um, you dampen your expectations, you enforce your curiosity, your fascination, even when things begin to unravel, even when you've told yourself, well, I'm not going to have any expectations. Truly set it aside. Truly set aside your preconceived ideas and notions and just let it unravel. Like, oh, here's an example of how that might be is like, say you're watching a movie in a foreign language, or it, it's even better if it's in a foreign language and a culture and even in a time period, and don't have it translated,
Oh,
but
wow.
just watch, watch human interaction with human interaction with form, with identities, with situations, and with that kind of level of I don't know anything about this culture. I don't know anything about these people. I could hear the language, but I don't know what the hell they're saying.
Hmm.
So you're this kind of that's kind of a practice curiosity, you know. You may have some reference to a time period or something like that and some notion. Um, um, but you go into that with just this kind of anticipation of that you're going to be fascinated because you don't know, which is another Zen thing. Don't know, um, but wanting to know, which is that practice of Wato Sam you were talking about. Um, but also with just this kind of zeal in the body, a relaxed body, not a tense body, but just this zealous anticipation. Um, you will be practicing non-abiding. You will
Mm,
experience contentment in anything that you do. It'll be kind of like, wow.
that's amazing. We need to do a whole episode on just curiosity. Maybe that could be the Watto episode.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Such a
it's
useful
very,
tool.
very powerful. Of course, we can get into even the neurology of curiosity versus uh, determined fixation.
Mm,
Uh, um, and of course, there's loads of information even about that, and the dampening of creativity, the dampening of learning, because we don't open ourselves to be curious. We kill ourselves in all future endeavors if we're not curious. But yeah, I could go on for a while. It would
Well,
be a
let's
good,
do it. Let's make it
yeah, let's
happen.
do it.
Yeah,
All
we'll
right.
do a
So,
whole episode on
an
that.
upcoming issue of how to actual practice curiosity and how it just obviously I'm kind of enlivened now even talking about it, but how it just opens the mind. Doesn't mean you're awakened. It just means that you are experiencing on a continuous basis non-abiding.
You're practicing, you're approximating what it's like to be non-abiding.
Yes,
You're as close as you can be
as close as you
um
can.
to your actual nature. So it's really interesting. So perhaps we'll leave it there for this episode. I'm sure that we'll return to these three principles, and I'm just going to read the passage one more time from the Platform Sutra as translated by Guogu. Huining says, "Good friends, since the past, this teaching of ours has first taken no thought as its principle, no form as its essence, and non-abiding as its foundation. No thought means to be without thought in the midst of thinking. No form is to transcend form within the context of forms and appearances. Non-abiding is your fundamental nature. All worldly things are empty." So there's a reason that it's been, uh, the Platform Sutra has been championed by even non-Zen paths of Buddhism for hundreds of years.
Yep.
So great. Anything else to add for this discussion, Dwayne? You feel good about what we've shared?
Yeah, I think that's good for now. And hopefully, as time goes forward, people will interact and ask pertinent questions to practice to life. We'll never go so far down the academic hole to compare this one sutra to that other, but and that's not really the purpose of our podcast. The
Right.
purpose of the podcast is to say, how can this help me in daily life? How do I exist in the world with some level of happiness or contentment or at easement without being so troubled, so buried? Can I do this? And the answer is yes. And hopefully we can pass along some ideas of how that might be for you.
Sounds great to me. And we'll be here. So thank you everybody so much for listening to the Off the Cushion podcast. And if you have a question or a comment, please do leave it on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you found us. We'll try to get to your to a response in a future episode. And be sure to like and subscribe for more. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.